Welcome to the information session for potential applicants for the competition for the interdisciplinary preparation of early intervention, special education, and related services personnel serving children with disabilities who have high intensity needs. This competition falls under the Personnel Development Program, which is a discretionary grant program managed by the Office of Special Education Programs. This information session will provide you with information about applying for this grant opportunity that was posted in the Federal Register on May 27, 2025. My name is Sun-Young An, a project officer at OSEP. Today, I will provide interested applicants with information regarding this grant competition. The assistance listing number is 84.325K. I would like to go over some caveats before we begin this webinar. First, the intent of this presentation is to provide guidance only, and the information contained in this webinar provides a general summary of the information contained in the notice inviting applications and the application instructions. Therefore, it's important that all prospective applicants read the entire notice, application instructions, and additional relevant information. In addition, applicants are encouraged to listen to a more general webinar entitled Applying for Office of Special Education Programs Discretionary Grants for an orientation to the overall application submission process. Please be aware of application timelines. The notice inviting applications was published in the Federal Register on May 27, 2025. All applications are due on June 26, 2025, no later than 11:59 and 59 seconds in the evening. Note that this is Eastern Time, and applicants should determine the corresponding time in your time zone. I will discuss the implications of a late submission later in this session. The application instructions will soon be available on grants.gov. It contains the most comprehensive information on how to apply. The instructions includes important information about the submission procedures using the grants.gov system. In the following section, I will go over important information including the purpose of this priority and eligible applicants. I will also discuss the funding level for the 84.325K competition. The purpose of the interdisciplinary preparation of early intervention, special education, and related services personnel serving children with disabilities who have high-intensity needs are to 1. Help address state-identified needs for personnel preparation in special education, early intervention, related services, and regular education to work with children, including infants, toddlers, and youth with disabilities. And 2. Ensure that those personnel have the necessary skills and knowledge derived from practices that have been determined through scientifically based research to be successful in serving those children. The absolute priority of the 325K grant is interdisciplinary preparation of early intervention, special education, and related services for personnel serving children with disabilities who have high-intensity needs. The purpose of this priority is to increase the number and improve the quality of early intervention, special education, and related services personnel who are fully credentialed to serve children who have high-intensity needs. The priority will fund high-quality interdisciplinary projects that use evidence-based strategies to prepare scholars at the master's, educational specialist, or clinical doctoral degree levels for professionals practice in natural environments, early childhood programs, classrooms, school settings, and in distance learning environments serving children with disabilities who have high-intensity needs. And personnel preparation programs that prepare individuals to be educational interpreters for the deaf at the bachelor's program. At the bachelor's degree levels can qualify under this priority and are exempted from the interdisciplinary requirement and the requirement for 2 or more graduate degree programs. There is one competitive preference under this priority. We will give 5 additional points to applicants that have not had an active 325K, 325M, or 325R grant in the last 5 years. Applicants are institutions of higher education, not a department or a program within an institution. A grant is considered active until the end of the grant funding period, including any extension period. Eligible applicants are IHEs and private nonprofit organizations that have legal authority to enter into grants and cooperative agreements with the federal government on behalf of an IHE. We have $6 million available for the 325K competition, and this can fund up to 24 awards. Each award will not exceed $1,250,000 for a total project period of 60 months, and a maximum award for a single budget period is no more than $350,000. This program uses a training indirect cost rate of 8%. Applicants may propose to use up to first 12 months of the performance period and up to $100,000 of the first budget period for planning. In addition to requesting up to $100,000 for planning, additional federal funds may also be used for scholar support and other grant activities occurring in year 1 of the project, provided that the total request for year 1 does not exceed the maximum award available for one budget period of 12 months, which is $350,000. Over the entire project period, 65% of the award at a minimum must be used for scholar support. In this section, I will introduce important terms defined for the purposes of the 325K priority. For the purposes of this priority, related services includes the following: speech-language pathology and audiology services, assistive technology services, interpreting services, intervener services, psychological services, applied behavior analysis, physical therapy and occupational therapy services, recreation including therapeutic recreation services, social work services, counseling services including rehabilitation counseling, and orientation and mobility services. For the purposes of this priority, high-intensity needs refers to a complex array of disabilities, including multiple disabilities, significant cognitive disabilities, significant physical disabilities, significant sensory disabilities, significant autism, significant emotional disabilities, or significant learning disabilities, including dyslexia, or the needs of children with these disabilities requiring intensive individualized intervention. For the purposes of this priority, interdisciplinary refers to preparing scholars from 2 or more graduate degree programs in special education or early intervention and 1 or more related services through shared coursework, group assignments, and extensive and coordinated field or clinical experiences. Different graduate degree programs across more than one institution of higher education may partner to develop an interdisciplinary project. An interdisciplinary does not include individual scholars who receive 2 or more graduate degrees, one graduate degree program that prepares scholars with different areas of focus, one graduate degree program that offers interdisciplinary content but does not prepare scholars from 2 or more degree programs together, or one graduate degree program in special education, early intervention, and related services partnering with a graduate degree program other than special education, early intervention, or related services. Programs in which scholars receive only a certificate or endorsement without a graduate degree does not qualify. For the purposes of this priority, evidence-based means, at a minimum, evidence that demonstrates a rationale where a key project component included in the project's logic model is informed by research or evaluation findings that suggest the project component is likely to improve relevant outcomes. For the purposes of this priority, scholar means an individual who is pursuing a master's, educational specialist, or clinical doctoral degree in early intervention, special education, or related services, who receives scholarship assistance as authorized under Section 662 of IDEA, and who will be eligible for a license, endorsement, or certification from a state or national credentialing authority following completion of the degree program identified in the application. And finally, who will be able to be employed in a position that serves children with disabilities for a minimum of 51% of their time or caseload. Individuals pursuing degrees in general education or early childhood education do not qualify as scholars eligible for scholarship assistance. In this section, beginning on slide 19, I will review application information, including focus areas, application narrative and selection criteria, and requirements. Once again, this webinar provides a general summary of the information contained in the NIA and the application instructions. Please make sure to read the entire notice, application instructions, and any additional relevant information if you intend to apply. In this competition, focus area A, preparing personnel to serve infants, toddlers, and preschool-age children with disabilities who have high-intensity needs, and focus area B, preparing personnel to serve school-age children with disabilities who have high-intensity needs. Each constitutes a separate funding category. The Secretary intends to award grants under each of these funding categories, provided that applications submitted are of sufficient quality. The notice lays out how the application narrative should be divided into 5 sections. These sections These section headings are identical to the 5 categories of selection criteria used by reviewers to evaluate each application. I will go over the narrative sections and selection criteria and point out in general terms what should be addressed in each section of the narrative and how reviewers will consider each of the section criteria. Please read the notice carefully since the information contained in the notice is significantly more detailed. Slide 22 discusses the project's significance. The narrative section on significance should demonstrate how the proposed project will address the need in the proposed preparation area to prepare personnel who are fully qualified to serve children with disabilities who have high-intensity needs. The proposed project will increase the number of personnel in the proposed preparation area who demonstrate the competencies needed to promote high expectations and improve outcomes, including literacy and math outcomes for children with disabilities who have high-intensity needs. Competencies needed to differentiate curriculum and instruction. This section should also address competencies needed to provide intensive evidence-based individualized instruction and interventions in person and through distance learning technologies in a variety of early intervention, early childhood, and school settings. The section should also demonstrate the competencies needed to collaborate with families and other providers using an interdisciplinary team approach to address the individualized developmental, learning, and academic needs of children with disabilities who have high-intensity needs and support their successful transitions from early childhood to elementary to secondary, or transition to post-secondary education and the workforce. And exercise leadership to improve professional practice and services and education for children with disabilities who have high-intensity needs. And lastly, the significance section should demonstrate how applicant has successfully graduated students in their program, including data on the number of students who have graduated in the last 5 years. Reviewers will score the significance of proposed projects between 0 and 10 points. In determining the significance of the proposed project, the Secretary considers the following criteria: the importance or magnitude of the results or outcomes likely to be attained by the proposed project, especially contributions towards improving teaching practice and student learning and achievement. Slide 26 relates to the quality of the project services. This section of the narrative should demonstrate how the project will conduct its planning activities, if the applicant will use any of the allowable first 12 months of the project period for planning, and the project will recruit and retain scholars. To meet this requirement, the applicant must describe the selection criteria the project will use to identify applicants for admission in the program. 2, the specific recruitment strategies the project will use to attract applicants, including applicants with disabilities. And please note that the recruitment strategies and selection criteria the applicant intends to use must ensure equal access and treatment of all applicants seeking admission to the program and must be consistent with applicable law, including federal civil rights law. And if a project is including a planning period, it should also describe the approach that will be used to mentor and support all scholars for retention and completion of the program within 60 months of the project start date and preparing them for careers in early intervention or special education. The quality of the project design section should also demonstrate how the project will be designed to promote the acquisition of the competencies needed by early intervention, special education, or related services personnel to support improved outcomes for children with disabilities who have high intensity needs. To address this requirement, the applicant must 1. Describe how the proposed components, such as coursework, field, or clinical experiences in early intervention, special education, or related services, work-based experiences, or other opportunities provided to scholars, and sequence of the project components will enable the scholars to acquire the competencies needed by personnel working with children with disabilities with high-intensity needs. 2. Describe how the proposed project will reflect current evidence-based practices, including in personnel preparation to prepare scholars to provide effective evidence-based instruction, interventions, and services that improve outcomes for children with disabilities with high-intensity needs in a variety of educational or early childhood and early intervention settings, including in-person and remote settings, and describe how the proposed project will engage parents, including parents with disabilities, public or private partnering agencies, schools or programs, and youth with disabilities to inform and support project components. When evaluating applications for quality of the project design, worth up to 35 points, reviewers will consider the following factors: the extent to which the services to be provided by the proposed project reflect up-to-date knowledge and an evidence-based project component, the extent to which the training or professional development services to be provided by the proposed project are of sufficient quality, intensity, and duration to build recipient and project capacity in ways that leads to improvements in practice among the recipients of those services, and the extent to which the proposed project represents an exceptional approach to meeting program purposes and requirements and serving the target population. Slide 31 relates to the quality of the management plan. This portion of the narrative should demonstrate how the project director and other key project personnel are qualified to prepare scholars in the project's preparation area. The project director and the other key project personnel will manage the components of the project, and the time commitments of the project director and other key project personnel are adequate to meet the objectives of the proposed project. Reviewers will score the quality of the management plan between 0 and 20 points. In determining the quality of the proposed project, in determining the quality of the management plan, the secretary considers the following factors: the extent to which the key personnel in the project, when hired, have the qualifications required for the proposed project, including formal training or work experience in fields related to the objectives of the project, and represent or have lived experiences of the target population. 2, the feasibility of the management plan to achieve project objectives and goals on time and within budget, including clearly defined responsibilities, timelines, and milestones for accomplishing project tasks, and the extent to which the time commitments of the project director and principal investigator and other key project personnel are appropriate and adequate to meet the objectives of the proposed project. Slide 34 relates to the adequacy of resources. This section of the narrative should demonstrate how accommodations and resources provided to support scholars will be individualized to support them in completing the program. How the budget is adequate for meeting the project objectives and mitigating financial burden to scholars in completing the program of study. And how the scholar support will be distributed to support scholars in completing their degrees. And in distributing scholar support, the applicant must consider that scholar support does not need to be uniform for all scholars and should be customized for individual scholar based on scholars' financial needs, including consideration of all costs associated with the cost of attendance. And scholar support can include support for cost of attendance, for example, tuition and fees, university student health insurance, an allowance for books, materials, and supplies, an allowance for miscellaneous personal expenses, an allowance for dependent care, such as childcare, an allowance for transportation, and or an allowance for room and board. Travel in conjunction with training assignments, including conference registration and stipends to support scholars' completion of the program and professional development. In designing scholar support, also consider projections for scholar support, should consider tuition increases and cost of living increases over the project period. And projects that prepare personnel at the bachelor's degree levels cannot provide scholar support during the first 2 years, for example, freshman and sophomore years of the degree program, to ensure that scholar support can lead to service obligation fulfillment. Reviewers will score the adequacy of resources between 0 and 20 points. In determining the adequacy of resources, the secretary considers the following factors: the adequacy of support for the project, including facilities, equipment, supplies, and other resources from the applicant or the lead applicant organization, and the extent to which the budget is adequate to support a proposed project, and the costs are reasonable in relation to the objectives, design, and potential significance of the proposed project. Slide 38 relates to the quality of the project evaluation and other evidence building. In this section, the narrative should address how the project will evaluate how well the goals or objectives of the proposed project have been met. To meet this requirement, the applicant must describe the outcomes to be measured for both the project and the scholars, particularly the acquisition of scholars' competencies, and the evaluation methodologies, data collection methods, and data analysis that will be used, and collect, analyze, and use data on scholars supported by the project to inform the project on an ongoing basis. Reviewers will score the quality of the project evaluation and other evidence building between 0 and 15 points, taking into consideration the extent to which the methods of the evaluation or other evidence building are thorough, feasible, relevant, and appropriate to the goals, objectives, and outcomes of the proposed project, and the extent to which the methods of the evaluation or other evidence building will provide performance feedback and provide formative, diagnostic, or interim data that is a periodic assessment of progress towards achieving intended outcomes. The external reviewers will judge and score the quality of the application using selection criteria. Each application can receive up to a total of 100 points. As I mentioned on the previous slides, the significance of the project can be scored up to 10 points. Quality of the project design up to 35 points. Quality of the management plan up to 20 points. Adequacy of resources up to 20 points. And quality of the project evaluation or other evidence building up to 15 points. The application instructions contain more details about the narrative requirements and selection criteria. So applicants are strongly encouraged to read these carefully when preparing the application narrative. When preparing an application, please keep in mind, in the event there are 2 or more applications with the same final score, and there are insufficient funds to fully support each of these applications, the scores under selection criteria B, quality of the project design, will be used as a tiebreaker. If the scores remain tied, then the scores under selection criterion D, adequacy of resources, will be used to break the tie. Application requirements include Appendix A and Appendix B. The applicant must include in Appendix A charts, tables, figures, graphs, and visuals that provide information directly relating to the application requirements for the narrative. And 2, a letter of support from a public or private partnering agency, school, or program that states it will provide scholars with a field or clinical experience in a high-need LEA, a high-poverty school, a school implementing a comprehensive support and improvement plan, a school implementing a targeted support and improvement plan for children with disabilities, a state educational agency, an early childhood and early intervention program located within the geographical boundaries of a high-need LEA, or an early childhood and early intervention program located within the geographical boundaries of an LEA serving the highest percentage of schools identified for comprehensive support and improvement, or implementing targeted support and improvement plans in the state. In Appendix B, include 1, a table that lists the project's required coursework and includes the course title, brief description, learning goals, and relevant state or national professional organization personnel standards for each course. And 2, 4 exemplar course syllabi required by the degree program that reflect evidence-based practices across the areas of assessment, inclusive practices, instructional strategies, and literacy and math as appropriate. Required project assurances include a budget in the application for the project director to attend a 2-day project directors meeting in Washington, D.C. during each year of the project, and an assurance that the project will meet the requirements related to A, informing all scholarship recipients of their service obligation commitment, and B, dispersing scholarships. And failure by a grantee to properly meet these requirements is a violation of the grant award that may result in the grantee being liable for returning any misused funds to the department. The project will meet the statutory requirements in Section 662E through H of IDEA. The project director, key personnel, and scholars will actively participate in learning opportunities such as webinars, briefings, supported by OSEP, and intended to promote opportunities for participants to understand reporting requirements, share resources, and generate new knowledge by addressing topics of common interest to participants across projects, including department priorities and needs in the field. The project website, if applicable, will be of high quality with an easy-to-navigate design that meets government or industry-recognized standards for accessibility. And scholar accomplishments, such as public service awards, publications, conference presentations, will be reported in annual and final performance reports. And annual data will be submitted on each scholar who receives grant support. The primary purposes of the data collection are to track the service obligation fulfillment of scholars who receive funds from OSEP grants, and to collect data for program performance measure reporting. Data collection includes the submission of a signed, completed pre-scholarship agreement and exit certification for each scholar funded under an OSEP grant. Applicants are encouraged to visit the Personnel Development Program Data Collection System website at the link provided on this slide for further information about this data collection requirement. Additionally, required assurances include the project will be operated in a manner consistent with non-discrimination requirements contained in federal civil rights laws. All the syllabi for the project's required coursework will be provided if requested by OSEP. At least 65% of the total award over the project period, up to 5 years, will be used for scholar support. Scholar support provided by the project is not based on the condition that the scholar works for the grantee while enrolled in the program. Here are a couple more general requirements. A successful applicant must make positive efforts to employ and advance in employment qualified individuals with disabilities and involve individuals with disabilities or parents of individuals with disabilities ages birth through 26 in planning, implementing, and evaluating the project. In this section, beginning on slide 47, I will cover some general information related to submitting an application. Once again, please refer to the notice for additional information. Please note that applications must be submitted electronically in the grants.gov system. See grants.gov submission procedures and tips for applicants included in the application instructions. We strongly recommend that you do not wait until the last day to submit your application. Grants.gov will put a date and timestamp on your application and then process it after it is fully uploaded. The time it takes to upload an application will vary depending on a number of factors, including the size of the application and the speed of your internet connection, and the time it takes grants.gov to process the application will vary as well. If grants.gov rejects your application, you will need to resubmit successfully to grants.gov before 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time on the deadline date. So we strongly encourage applicants to submit all narratives and attachments in PDF read-only format and to ensure narratives and attachments are formatted to ensure accessibility for reviewers. Applicants under this priority may not submit the same proposal under personnel preparation of special education, early intervention, and related services personnel at historically Black colleges and universities, tribally controlled colleges and universities, and other minority serving institutions, assistant listing number 84.325M. Applicants may submit substantively different proposals under assistant listing number 84.325K and ALN 84.325M. The Office of Special Education Programs will not fund similar personnel preparation projects within the same IHE across the ALN 84.325K and 84.325M competitions. In order to make sure that the application is submitted on time and correctly, please register as early as possible in grants.gov and start the application process. Do not wait until you have the application ready to register. Grants.gov will create a workspace for applicants to submit the pieces of the application over time. If you are already registered in the system for award management, make sure your registration is current. So submit early, a day or more in advance if possible. Should there be any problems with the grants.gov system, submitting early will allow you time to correct the problem and resubmit before the deadline. And verify that the submission is okay. Grants.gov will send applicants notifications that the submission was on time and validated. So applicants should make sure that they receive that confirmation and not assume the submission was okay. On slide 53, we have some additional advice for submitting an application. Pay attention to the maximum funding levels for the grant as contained in the notice. Awards will not be made for amounts higher than the published amounts. Following the recommended organization, page limits, spacing, and font sizes to facilitate the application review process, and applicants should strongly consider following the recommendations. PDF files make it easier for the system to put together different parts of the application into one application that reviewers can more easily read and follow. The grants.gov submission procedures and tips for applications in the application instructions can be extremely helpful for submitting an application in grants.gov. Please note that if for any reason an application is submitted more than once and validated more than once, the last application submitted will be considered, and previous applications will be considered duplicates and therefore ineligible. There are two additional reasons why an application may not be eligible. First, an application received after the published deadline will not be eligible for funding. Second, applications that do not address the priority will also not be eligible for funding. For example, an application proposing to provide professional development to childcare staff will not be eligible since that is not the purpose of this priority. Once again, the purpose of this priority is interdisciplinary preparation of early intervention, special education, and related services personnel serving children with disabilities who have high intensity needs. Well, thank you for reviewing this webinar. As I mentioned at the beginning, this webinar covered highlights what's contained in the application instructions and priority. If you have additional questions, please contact me, preferably by email at sanyong.an@ed.gov. You can also contact me by phone at 202-987-0141. Have a wonderful day.